Welcome everyone to Legally Speaking. I'm Sonia Brown.
And I'm Kenya Johnson. Legally Speaking is brought to you by the Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys, GABWA.
GABWA is a voluntary bar association that seeks to advocate for women and children and empower our communities. Please remember, this show is not intended to provide legal advice. So if you feel that you have a legal concern or an issue, it's always best for you to consult an attorney.
On today's show, we're discussing real estate in a depressed economy, buying, selling, and even investment opportunities. So there's more to come when we return on Legally Speaking. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Legally Speaking. Today's topic is real estate, and we're joined by our first guest, real estate broker Anthony Williams of Marcus and Millichap. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Williams, tell us about your business and how you came into real estate.
I came into real estate from a background in educational consulting. I initially wanted to become a college president, and a lot of traveling and living out of suitcases changed that idea. I had undergraduate degrees in architecture and building construction, and it was a segue into development and to brokerage. Marcus & Millichap is the largest investment brokerage firm in America, offices throughout the country, 80 offices. And what we do is we offer individuals the opportunity to acquire income-producing assets that yield profits.
Is that commercial real estate?
It is exactly commercial real estate, yes.
Okay. Well, we've heard a lot about our economy going up and down and the troubles that we're having. Is now a good time to invest in commercial real estate?
That has been the perception for quite some time, but it's absolutely a wonderful time to get involved in commercial real estate. Typically, we look at 2009 and 10 as the bottom of the market, and 2013 has seen a recovery. To put it in terms, 2006 and 7 was the height of commercial real estate, and 2013, the last 8 months, we've done more transactions than we have in the last 3 years. So it is a wonderful time to be involved in commercial real estate.
So for those that are interested in investing in real estate, what are some of the financing options? And is the federal government involved in any way in the financing?
Financing, there are a number of different financing options. So typically, it's broken down into tiers, the mom and pop, so to speak, the institutional investor and so forth. But the SBA has programs are available, but typically for the small investor, it is a relationship with your bank. Typically it's 30% down, you finance the rest, and you start taking the income from the property.
So how much money would I need to jump into the commercial real estate market?
Well, it's a perception that you need, large sums of money, and that's not necessarily the case. And we're not talking about residential housing where you're flipping houses and pulling sinks out. In commercial, it is, I trade this loan amount for the income and future income of a property. So in terms of dollar amount, I mean, yesterday we did a $20 million deal, but today we have a $280,000 deal. So look at it in terms of, it's not what the deal is, it's what you have access to. If you can go to your bank, or if you have $50,000 in a checking account or a savings account or IRA, you can put that money to use. And a lot of times what we find is that our clients are not necessarily comfortable with the stock market. I mean, you're sort of playing that guessing game. With commercial real estate, you have a more definitive outcome of what that income is going to be on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis. And that's why we encourage people to take a look at it.
So what if I want to finance commercial real estate? What type of down payment, percentage-wise, is typical?
I'll give you an example. If you're looking at a small strip center, that's $400,000. And that's what we typically call a medium to small size investment. $400,000, you would typically go to your Wells Fargo or your relationship bank, and they would require probably 25 to 30% down. So if you have, let's say, $120,000, that's the down payment that you would put down. You would finance the rest, but the income you receive of that will cover the note, expenses, and probably yield a few $1,000s a month.
Well, income is definitely an attractive idea. What type of generating income are we looking at? How much can be made from investment property, and what types of investment property?
It's all asset classes. Right now, multifamily, the apartments and the duplexes are selling, like hotcakes. But retail and some of the large assets we're talking about, hotels and those things, that's probably out of the scope for the first-time investor. But you can find smaller duplexes for a few $100,000. You can find retail shopping centers and strip centers and single tenants for $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. And again, you're only investing 30%. That's what the bank requires, a 30% down payment, and then the returns probably on those are 8 to 10%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what if you find yourself in a commercial real estate property and you can no longer afford it? Say your tenants have left, or it's just not as profitable as you thought. What happens with foreclosure and bankruptcy with commercial property?
Well, foreclosure, I mean, it's a little different than residential, but there are a number of different options that you have afforded to you before you get to that process. In commercial real estate, a lot of times if you have a strip center or so with 3 or 4 or 5 tenants in it, and one of your tenants leave, you have an opportunity to re-tenant that space and bring someone else in, or refinance it, or if the market is a place where you want to try something else, come see me, we'll sell it and get you out of the property into something else.
Okay. And so are there any advantages or disadvantages to purchasing your property, commercial property, on the courthouse steps in, say, a foreclosure sale?
There are some advantages, but I can't honestly say that I would recommend that for the novice investor. Typically, when you buy real estate at the courthouse steps, it's at a discount. It's in foreclosure. But with that comes some certain risks. You don't know if the property has been maintained, if there's copper in it. So that's not necessarily something I would advise for the first-time buyer. For novice people, what I would recommend is to put yourself in a position where you can provide and do due diligence and see exactly what you're getting into. You'll know that the tenants are there, how long they've been there, how long the leases are in place. You'll know what your debt service is, and you have a general idea, okay, for the next 7 years, this is the income I will make, or the next 10, whatever the lease term is. So again, there are some advantages to purchasing distressed properties, but it is for people who have the wherewithal to, take advantage of unforeseen circumstances.
Now, is it best to invest in commercial property with a group, an investment group, or as an individual? What do you see more?
Typically, I mean, it is get involved. That's the first thing. I mean, for so long, people have sat on the sidelines and just weren't educated. We've all heard real estate is the way that you can make money, but how do you do it? So there are certain investment clubs that help people become more knowledgeable about it. But typically, when you have 3, 4, 5 people, then the profits are split, accordingly. What I would recommend is to get with an experienced broker, tell them what your concerns are. Let's look at what finances are and find a property that suits you. And it's not a situation where you have to, like in residential, go out, pull the sink out, change the toilet. You have management companies in place. So essentially what you're doing is you have your money working for you.
Okay.
No.
Can you share with our viewers what are some of the lesser known but profitable investment opportunities in commercial real estate? What are you recommending now?
Right now, what I would recommend, and it seems to be very, very lucrative right now, are the smaller multifamily 50-unit apartments, duplexes, and then some of the smaller 3, 4 tenant retail shops. You can purchase those things right now under $500,000, you're putting 30%, 25 to 30% down, and you're making 10 to 12, sometimes 14% return on those.
Mr. Williams, thank you so much for joining us today. You've given us so much valuable information that I'm going to take a look at my own portfolio.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, just to end it on this note, there are a lot of people who are afraid of commercial real estate. It is absolutely the time to get involved, and the profits and the opportunities are abound.
All right. When we return on Legally Speaking, we'll hear from two real estate attorneys in the areas of foreclosure and bankruptcy. So when we return, more to come. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Legally Speaking. I'm Sonia Brown. On today's show, we're talking about buying and selling real estate in a down economy. In our first segment, we heard from a broker talking about commercial real estate investment. And now we'll talk to two attorneys who specialize in foreclosures and bankruptcy. We have with us today attorneys Latrice and Leonard Medley. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And before we get into this, it's a huge topic right now, especially in our economy and everything that's going on. I want to hear a little bit about you and your practice and how you got involved in this. We'll start with you, Attorney Lattin.
All right, thank you. Basically, I've been doing bankruptcy for the last 2 to 3 years, and I started at a large filing firm downtown. And while I was there, our bosses sent us to the Max Gardner Bankruptcy Boot Camp in North Carolina. And when we went there, we learned all these different litigation techniques in bankruptcy and a lot about mortgage fraud and mortgage foreclosure defense. So that's how I had gotten into it, from going to the boot camp and the information that I learned there. And I went out on my own and specialized in bankruptcy litigation and foreclosure defense in state courts and federal courts.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you. And Attorney Medley.
I got my start about 10 years ago doing real estate closings. We were coming out of a recession at that point, so the firm and I were doing a lot of closings. That was back in '02. And then in 2005, kind of saw the market turning a little bit, and we started focusing a little bit more on doing the bankruptcies for our clients that were investors at that time, had first and second mortgages they were trying to get rid of. So it just kind of naturally led into doing more bankruptcy work from the real estate work we were doing before.
Okay, so we've been in a recession for several years. Hopefully we're on the upswing now. Are we seeing more or less foreclosures now as opposed to when we first went into the recession? How's it looking right now?
Well, Georgia's number 4 in the U.S.
Wow.
So because we have a non-judicial foreclosure process, it's a lot quicker to get the foreclosures through the system. Normally it takes about 60 days. They send out a letter, they advertise in the paper, and then the house is being sold on the first Tuesday in the courthouse steps. So there's really no judicial way to go about it because it's a non-judicial remedy. So anything that we do has to either be prior to the foreclosure with the filing of a bankruptcy or after the foreclosure with the filing of a wrongful foreclosure suit to get it set aside.
Okay, so you said non-judicial.
Correct.
And just for our viewing audience, what does that mean if it's as opposed to being judicial?
There are certain ways you can foreclose on properties. Georgia is a lien theory state, which means we're foreclosing on the security deed. And because they're foreclosing on the security deed, we don't have to go through the court system. You never get a chance to present your case in front of a judge. They're basically calling your house out on the courthouse steps on the first Tuesday of the month. Whereas Florida, for example, is a state that actually forecloses on the mortgage. So therefore, all their foreclosures are done through the court system. Both systems have their pros and cons, but Georgia is a non-judicial foreclosure state.
How does someone get to a point where a bank or a lien holder is foreclosing on their home? Like, how do you get there?
It really depends because you have some instances where somebody could be in there, they could not pay, and the bank is rushing to foreclose within 90 days. I've seen other instances where people have been sitting in their house for 4 years and nothing's been done and they haven't made payments, or they're trying to go through a modification process. So it really just depends on who the lender is, who the investor is, and whether or not the property is marketable and they want to get it back.
And I know I've seen it and I've heard about it and seen it in my own community where neighbors, I come home one day and I think they're on vacation because I haven't seen their car, and then it turns into a week, 3 weeks, 2-3 months, and I realize that they've just left. Do you see a lot of that in your practice where people just walk away from their homes?
You see it, but each case is truly different or unique. That person didn't just find out they were getting foreclosed on, and the sheriff didn't just show up and put them out. There's a process. They received a certified letter in the mail. They received something from the mail, from the from the bank. What happens a lot of times is these houses are so far underwater, and the banks are not willing to work with them that people just truly give up, and then they move out. And when they move out, the property is just sitting vacant until the banks come in and find a new buyer for the property. But there are a lot of properties that are sitting vacant at this time.
Okay. So what are options if I know, let's say someone's lost their job or illness? I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of people file bankruptcy because of medical bills and can't afford to pay. So I know this is coming down the pipe. What can somebody do to sort of prepare themselves or make some sort of preparations so that they don't end up in a situation where their home's being foreclosed on?
Well, in my practice, I do a lot of debt counseling with my clients because sometimes it's not feasible to keep a home. And I know that a lot of people bought these homes back when it was a subprime market. They have interest onlys, or they have mortgages that they just can't afford, and nothing that I can do can make them afford that mortgage. So a lot of times I look at the current financial situation. If someone's unemployed, I always tell my clients, there's no free house out of this. You know, we can try to get you a plan that you can work with, or a reasonable mortgage, or possibly get it down to the actual value, but you're going to have to pay something. So it comes to the point of, is there something that they can pay, what that amount is, and then what steps we can take to help them with that, albeit bankruptcy, where they can take the mortgage arrears and fight those and then pay going forward, or if it is some type of foreclosure defense action to sort of force the bank into a modification that'll help them stay in their home.
Okay, we talked about bankruptcy being a possible way to protect yourselves. What does that mean in terms of keeping the home or not keeping the home? Is it possible if you file bankruptcy to even keep your home?
Yes, you can. There are different types of bankruptcies. The main types are Chapter 7 and a Chapter 13. 13 is a repayment plan. The Chapter 7 is called a liquidation. And the 13, you normally file a 13 when you're behind on the home and you have arrears and you want to try to catch up the arrears while still keeping the home. The Chapter 7 does not have a provision where it is